Hello everybody, I'm Colin D. Ellis and welcome to the Culture and Coffee podcast, where every episode I discuss a new topic of workplace culture and provide some insights and some practical things for you to do. Don't forget to like, subscribe and to share with people who you may think would be interested. Okay, let's get on with today's episode. Hello everybody, it's Colin Ellis here. Welcome to another episode of the Culture and Coffee podcast. Now, for those of you interested in the coffee, it's a beet coffee. Here we go. Podcast. Can't really hear the beans in here. Yes, I do grind my own. It's from Beet Coffee here in Melbourne, and it's a Colombia Finca. I think I've had this one before, but I really like it. Sorry, I think I've featured it before. It's raspberry, cherry and dark chocolate. If only there is melted dark chocolate in the coffee. Let me get started here. Okay, today I am talking about the to-do list. I was reading a book. I recently finished a book. I like to get a big book over Christmas to read. And usually it's like a historical book, or it might be a kind of a business book, something that I can really get my teeth into when I take some time off. And this year it was, my wife always buys it for me, it was Ray Dalio. Ray Dalio wrote a book called The Changing World Order. If you don't know about Ray Dalio, I suppose he's an investor. I think that's what you would say. Bridgewater Associates is his company. And he wrote a book called Principles, maybe about 5 years ago. They're big chunky books. They give you lots and lots to think about. I think that's why I like them. They really kind of drive a different level of thought. Anyway, there was a quote in the book which caught my eye. Well, there was more than one. So every book that I read, every kind of business book that I read, I take notes from, and then I upload the notes into. I type up my notes into Google Drive so that they become searchable. Every time I want a quote, or I'm looking for something specific, or a little dose of inspiration. I don't like to wheel out the same old quotes that everybody else has. Culture and strategy for breakfast. Like Peter Drucker said that about 30 years ago, and people are still wheeling it out. So I like to read modern contemporary books. And he said, one of the quotes I pulled from The Changing World Order was, human productivity is the most important force in the world's total wealth, power and living standards to rise over time. And I remember reading about 3 or 4 years ago that actually productivity is really low at the minute, or else it had only risen. I think the US Bureau of Labour Statistics, they're the people that publish these things, it had risen like 0.3%, which is appalling, really. In fact, those statistics were released, but they were for the pre-COVID era, because we know productivity took a setback during COVID. And they were the pre-COVID era. And it kind of gave a sense that for all the technological advancements, we really hadn't come very far in the world. Now, of course, COVID made things worse because we were plunged into this global crisis that really stoked anxiety, stress, all of these things. And of course, we were glued to the news. We were glued to the news almost every hour of every day to kind of figure out what's going on. It's strange thinking back to those times now when you think about the news coming out of Italy and all of these things. And so it's only natural that it took a step back. Now, of course, once the COVID restrictions lifted, being careful there not to say that COVID is over, once the COVID restrictions lifted, there was almost an immediate demand from senior leaders and organisations like, right, we have to get back to normal, which ignored the fact that there was no such thing as normal, and normal had changed forever, which it has. But there was this real, let's get back, let's get people back, let's be productive again, almost like the new ways couldn't be productive. And of course they could, and I've talked about this on the podcast before, is the organisations that reset their cultures for the new way of working are the ones that continue to gain from that. But what it ignored really was the fact that from a productivity perspective, People were overwhelmed. Not just overwhelmed emotionally, and a lot of people still feel overwhelmed emotionally, but also in terms of the amount of work that they've got to do. Almost every, I did a speech last week about multi-generational workforce, and I was talking to someone, and I said, I'm always careful not to say, are you busy? That's the standard question that people ask these days. And of course, what are you going to say? No, I'm not. And I just said, I said, hey, how are you finding this year? You on top of things? And he's like, I feel like I'm so far behind. I feel like I've got a million things on my task list. So I was like, well, here's a good thing for me to talk about is the dreaded to-do list or the task list. We're originally going to call this podcast the tyranny of the to-do list. But I'd like to, I want to put a positive spin on it and help you to really kind of tame the to-do list. But coming back to what I was saying, I think there is almost an expectation that people have got the capacity for more work. I don't really know where that came from. The classic, we need to do more with less, which is physically impossible. I think that, I hope I said physically impossible, not unpossible. I sounded like, something out of The Simpsons. It's physically impossible to do. And I think that the other thing is that organisations have faced certain financial hardships, which meant that they've had to lose some people. But the amount of work doesn't seem to have changed for some reason. So I feel there's a pressure on employees more than ever to do more. And so it's really, really important for, not just really important, it's really, really important that you are on top of the things that you've got to do. Now, we know kind of the facts and the research shows that when we have too many things on our plate, it can cause this real feeling of overwhelm and really impact our mental health. I was someone else I was talking to at the event that I did last week. I was talking about well-being programs, and they said that their organisation invested hundreds of thousands of dollars into well-being programs, when actually if they'd spent that money on culture, they wouldn't actually need the well-being programs, which of course is entirely true. It's entirely true. And one CEO I was talking to last year, I said to him, I was like, it's important that you provide well-being support for your staff, but actually if they had less work, that's the best thing that you could do for them. I said, I'm not talking about, they're taking half the week off. I was like, if you just give them greater clarity on priorities and then gave them the time to do their job instead of stuffing their calendars full of ends and back-to-back meetings, then, that would be benefit. That would be more beneficial than the millions of dollars you invest in well-being programs. But anyway, so when you feel that overwhelmed, when you've got too many things on your task list, of course, it's stress and anxiety. Particularly where those deadlines loom, and the research shows that Gen Z are feeling it more than most. Gen Z are the generation coming into the workforce right now, and they're having to deal with some of the nonsense things that have been going on for a long time. But most people feel it too. The second thing is, and it's linked to the first thing, is when you're stressed, when you're anxious, then procrastination can take over. Particularly if you get midway through a task and then you need someone else's help and then it seems to stall, and it's like a car you can't get going again because you've lost that initial motivation that you had for the task. You need someone else's input, and when it's not forthcoming, like getting started again, like literally somebody has to jumpstart you. But we do, 20% of the world's population is procrastinating at any one time, according to a piece of research. But procrastination, you feel guilty. I don't know if you've had that feeling. You feel like, oh God, I should have got back to them. I should have done this. Should have done that. Like should have comes into your language. And I think where you've got a task that's taking longer than it should, it just exacerbates it. And it just increases that cycle of procrastination, guilt. Do you know what I mean? And all of these things then have an impact on our sleep. and our ability to rest. Now, one of the things that I often recommend to people is if you feel overwhelmed by everything you've got to do in work, and if you find you're anxious at night, kind of write down not only the things that you've got to do to get them out of your head, but also write down how you feel and kind of maintain that mental health diary. And you have to make sure that you record the good and the bad. I think a mental health diary can be a really good tool to remind you that actually there are some good days. I think, often we focus on the bad days, but there were some good days when you got stuff done. And then what was the difference there? And often you'll find on the good days when you're keeping a mental health diary, they were the days that you got stuff done. But of course, coming back to the lack of sleep, without sleep, you're not rested. You you kind of make bad decisions. So the first thing you do in the morning isn't to take action; it's to check your phone or your email or whatever it might be. But we need sleep. We need sleep for energy, and it really cleans out the brain. Not to go into too much detail, but it kind of flushes the toxins out of the brain. Unless you've been drinking heavily the night before because of the stress and anxiety, of course. But generally, it does. It flushes the toxins out, and it makes you feel refreshed, and you're able to do the job again. And then kind of for me, the real last thing is that that overall pressure that you feel. So all of these things contribute, and of course, if you're not sleeping, this sense of overwhelm. I likened it once to a real heavy duvet. You get in bed. Have you ever done that? Have you ever gone somewhere, maybe on holiday or something, and the duvet's really heavy, and you're like, what? It's got, and you don't move, and they're like a baby really tucked into bed because the duvet's so heavy. But that's how it can feel when you've got too many things on your task list. You can't move. You just don't know what to do first. And it's always there. It's always present. And then slowly but surely, you just have to chip away at one thing or another thing or another thing. And of course, this is where the to-do list can be useful, in the sense that it provides you with a kind of a one-stop view, kind of a singular view. That's the word I'm looking for. A singular view of the things that are on your plate. Now, I always say to people, if you've got more than 10 things on your task list, then you probably need to ask for help. And I'm not joking here. You probably need to ask for help. And by 10 things, I mean 10 meaningful things. Attend meeting isn't a task. It's something that involves a degree of effort. I understand that attending a meeting involves effort. Actually setting up a meeting might be the task, but attending a meeting generally isn't. It's just something that you have to do as part of your job. So if you've got more than 10 things, you have to ask for help, mainly from the people around you. But one of the things that I found useful is a separation between an overall list and a daily list. And so I used to maintain two lists. I still do. I have a master list and a daily list. And the master list really contains everything that I have to do at a high level. And I meaningfully say a high level, because actually when you get to your actual task list, there needs to be a bit more detail around it to help you plan a little bit better. Most people's task list are, simply 3 or 4 words that tells you what the thing is, but doesn't go into any more detail than that. So you're really none the wiser about how much effort's involved. I'll come back to that in a second. So the master list, everything at a high level, or else everything that I feel like I have the time to do. And the master list I would create at the start of the week, always at the start of the week. And it very rarely change, I would say. Somebody asked me a question once, is like, oh, do you prioritize it? No, not really at this stage. It's a bit of a brain dump, because I found that if I tried to prioritize it, I would end up procrastinating. And then I'd end up wasting time about, kind of trying to do it at the prioritization comes as part of the daily task planning. Now, my master task list I would do on a Sunday. You don't have to do it on a Sunday. I'm not encouraging working at the weekend. You could do it last thing on Friday. In fact, you could make that a ritual that you have. is the last thing that I do on a Friday is create my master task list for the following week. You might even want to do your daily task list for Monday. I wouldn't recommend it. You could do that first thing on Monday, because otherwise you're going to be thinking of those things. Create your master task list, and then you're done for the weekend. If you don't have to work weekends, then you're done. And that would be the last thing that I do. So I used to do mine on a Sunday, and personally, I love the satisfaction of having that view in one place. Now, of course, I used to write it down in a notebook, and now I don't. Now I use Google Drive to maintain my task list. But what you need to do is find a system that works for you. And you want one version of the truth. You don't want multiple versions of the truth. You just want one version of the truth. Now, the daily task list is something that, let's say I would do it on a Sunday. What's my daily task list for Monday? For you, it could be the very first thing you do on a Monday. When I look at my calendar, how much time do I have for tasks today? How much time? If you only have an hour, then you can only get one thing done. Because what organizations should never advocate is working later and later and later. And actually, if you don't have time to do the things that need to get done, then it's incumbent on you to actually start to decline some of the meetings that you've been invited to, providing the very legitimate reason that you have something more important to work on. So when I'm doing my daily task list, I would look at my master task list and I'd say, okay, well, what are the most important things that need to get done today? And how much time do I have to do them? And, for me, it would be usually a kind of a minimum of 3 and a maximum of 5. And a 5, you'd have to have a really clear day. So a minimum of 3. Now, this is the first thing that I would, I'm suggesting you do in the morning. And what you have to do is you have to do a little bit of planning against each of those, which is why when I get to the end of Monday, I would always plan my task list for Tuesday, right? Because I want to know how much time do I actually need in order to get this task done. Remember, in order to be productive, being productive requires that you make some choices. Now, Stephen Covey had a model on this. Stephen Covey wrote a book called First Things First. And I took that model and I tweaked it, when I teach prioritization for my clients as part of my programs. I tweaked it a little bit, but essentially it's similar to the Stephen Covey model. And Stephen Covey basically said you've got kind of important tasks and you've got not important tasks. And you've also, that if you imagine a vertical column, you've got important at the top, not important at the bottom, and a horizontal axis, you've kind of got now and later. So if something's in the now and important category, that has to be done today. So that's a priority. That's literally a priority. That needs to get done. So for me, that's in my do column. If I've got something that's important that I can do later, I diarise that. So I know I've got that on my master task list for the week. And I know that needs to be done on Thursday or Friday, but it doesn't need to be done right now. But the tasks I need to do right now are things that are important and that are immediate. Anything that's not important, but someone's asking to be done now, you need to decide. If it's not important to you, you need to decide what to do here. I think sometimes I have conversations with people who just accept stuff all the time, even when they don't have time to do it. Now, you have to have a little bit of courage here to be able to say no, and for me, how productive you are depends on how willing you are to say no to stuff. And no is a complete sentence. If someone says, can you do this? You can just say, no, I can't. I literally don't have a spare minute in the day to do this. I can do it on Wednesday or Thursday, or else I can ask Colin if he can help me to do it, but I can't do it. So for me, that's for you to decide. If it's not important, but someone's asking to do it now, you decide, where does it get delegated to? And so that includes things like meetings and emails that require responses or whatever. And then anything that's not important that can be done later, that's stuff you just need to ditch. Just ditch that. Some pleasant activities if you're in the office and someone's having cake, but you've got more important work to do, you don't have the cake, you do the work. And yes, isn't it sad to miss out if someone's coming into the office or whatever. It's a celebration. Show your face for 5 minutes, then apologize and say, working on priorities. Like, no one will disrespect that decision. In fact, people will be like, how disciplined are they? How disciplined are they? So the daily task list, you focus on the 3 things, and you're really going to, for me, there's often a huge disparity between the time it takes to write a task down and the actual time it takes to do it. And so it's important that you plan those tasks. How much effort is involved? Do you need to speak to someone else? How much time do you need to be in flow? And, 90 minutes is seen as the optimum time to be in flow. And when you're in flow, you can concentrate solidly on that thing that you need to do. And so, can you block out time to do tasks? Well, not only can you should do. Say, you can block out 90 minutes and you can write, in the calendar appointment or the time that you block out, just put write report. This is you becoming really, really focused, really, really disciplined, and using the to-do list for good. I think that the to-do list has things, it has achievable tasks on there. You look at the task and go, oh yeah, I can get that done today. And if it's, a good question would be, okay, well, what happens if it's going to take me a couple of days? We'll just call it part 1, part 2, part 3. But make sure you're super disciplined to get it done. Don't just let it run over because you can't be bothered to get it finished, You do have to have discipline. So I think a good to-do list, it's got achievable tasks. Good to-do list, achievable task, there's a bit of a plan behind it. So there's a good description of what it is, and then there's a plan behind it, particularly around, you want to highlight how much effort is involved. And effort is, hours or minutes, however you want to do it. And you estimate the effort based on historical information. This is something that you've done before, or else, you kind of ask someone, how long does it take for me to write this report? And you base it off that. There's got to include some flexibility just in case there are delays. Don't plan to fail, and make sure that you're not confusing the task with a goal. What's the thing that you have to get done? I think a lot of times people's task lists are really ambiguous, and they'll look at it and they'll go, now what did I mean by that? Have you ever done that? What did I mean? And you spend ages looking at your task list, which is just another way of wasting time, of course. So, write down what's the proper detail, what's the proper deadline. What are you shooting for? It just can't be vague in any way, shape or form. So here's 7 things, just to wrap up the podcast for today. Here's 7 things that you need to think about or need to consider when you're writing a to-do list, right? Is plan and prioritize a daily list. So make sure you capture some details about what needs to be done and then put the things in order. You want to do the most important thing first, right? Or the thing you fear first, feel the fear and do it anyway. Make sure you write down tasks, not goals. What's the thing that you need to do? And put a limit on your list. Make sure that your to-do list matches the amount of productive hours you have available in your day. So if you've only got 1 hour, it's 1 task. If you need to get 3 things done, then you need a minimum of, 3 to 4 hours. And you just have to make a decision, like I said before, to cancel or decline some things because this is more important. Number 4, don't overburden yourself with recurring tasks. I see that a lot where people have got something, I'll just put it in as a recurring task. It's like a recurring meeting. And you end up doing it because it's in rather than asking whether you should do it. So don't just keep things, copy it to the next day and the next day and the next. Some stage you're going to have to draw a line under it and say, I'm never going to get this done. Can I delegate it? Can someone else help me? I think the 5th thing is don't be distracted from your priorities. Other people will try and impose their own sense of urgency on you and their own priorities on you. So you really got to ask the question, is this something that needs to be done? Is this something that needs to be done by me? Is this something that needs to be done by me now? If not, then when? And then provide that feedback. Yes, I can do that, but it'll be Thursday. Number 6, take action. If we're honest, you waste time first thing in the morning. Most people do. If you're checking your email first thing in the morning, wasting time. Email, remember, is an asynchronous tool. In other words, you get to it when you get to it. The first thing you should do is open your task list and do the first thing on the task list. You know, I've told the story before on the podcast how I like to keep mornings free. Mornings were my best time. And so what I would do, at least for the first 90 minutes of the day, is get work done. I could have all my meetings after that, but taking action and getting work done was the first thing. And then the last thing, the seventh thing, is when you complete a task, have a little celebration. Even if that little celebration is just you going, well done me. Just do something, have a little ritual or a gesture to signify completion. Or else treat yourself to a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. You know, when you're in flow, you want to get everything ready before you start the task. Obviously, you might need a bathroom break, that's fine. But if you're going up and making a drink, you're distracting yourself, you're compromising your productive time. When you do a task list, strike it off the list. Get rid of it. It's gone. It's done. It's finished. Have a little bit of a flourish, a little bit of a pat yourself on the back, and off you go onto the next list. What I would say about the to-do list is that if you don't tame it, it'll be like reading of a chapter of a book. You'll end up reading the same paragraph over and over again and never getting to the end of it. It's up to you to tame your to-do list and make sure you get everything done. Hope you've enjoyed today's podcast. Ta-ra for now. Thanks for listening to today's podcast. If you'd like to find out more about how I can help you transform the culture of your team, head to my website at www.colindellis.com.